Welcome to The Human Factor, the show where we explore social change through the eyes of social entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders. My name is Melanie Roussin, her name is Erin McCabe, and we are your hosts. Sharna De Lacy is one of the co-founders of the Fabric Social, an ethical clothing company that is also a social enterprise. Launched in 2014 by three young Australian women, the Fabric Social works with women in Northeast India to produce beautiful silk garments that helps women get out of poverty for good. So, hi, Sharna. I just wanted to say, if you could please fill in into my intro and tell us a little bit about how you would describe yourself.
Okay. Well, we've expanded now into Myanmar, so across the border from Northeast India, in partnership with ActionAid. So what would I add to that? That we work in Northeast India and Myanmar. So we tend to talk about Asia. And I think we also are working with people who have been affected by conflict or insecurity in some way.
Excellent. And what about yourself, Sharna? How did you come to be involved?
I came from an activist background, so trained in social work and development, and was working in advocacy for small grassroots women's organisations and global women's peace organisations specifically, and was involved in a project in India called the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network, which is run by an incredible woman called Bina Lakshmi Nepram, and she's from Manipur, which is a very, very severely conflict-affected state in the Northeast. And through that work, my co-founder and I were both engaged really intensively in the issues in the Northeast and women's action and women's experiences in those areas. And my partner Fee was doing some law-based stuff, collecting testimonies to compile for human rights reporting. And I was writing an advocacy paper that I would later present at the Human Rights Council in Geneva around arms reduction and the issues of small arms in that area. So really intensely high-level stuff, very separate from, I guess, where we've ended up. But the Fabric Social was born out of that work because there is, in these small grassroots organisations, there's very common development models where they'll do this advocacy work and a lot of empowerment work and a lot of mobilising, and couple that with livelihood projects. So it could be training for tailors, providing looms and equipment, really targeted to the lives of the rural poor, they would say, in India. And what we found after getting engaged with the particular project that we were designing and doing that with the UN Development Program was that there was a lot of inputs, a lot of energy and a lot of potential for this to actually make a difference through income generation. But there was a massive missing piece of the puzzle, which was what were they making and was it marketable, and where was the connection between these livelihood projects, particularly these very isolated ones, and people who would buy those products.
Absolutely. That's a really interesting point. Like, yeah, people are making stuff, but will people buy it? That's
And I guess they won't. They will make the same thing, very traditional products perhaps, and then the marketplace is flooded with the same kind of designs. And so they were selling for very, very cheap.
So as a co-founder of an organisation like the Fabric Social, what's a typical day look like for you?
Look, we're a remote team. So I work from a home office most of the time. And my partner Fee does as well. And then we've got a network of volunteers and someone who's come on board and works quite intensively with us since the beginning is Megan. And so we're all working in different places at different times because of our other schedules. So there's not really a typical day. There's a lot of Excel laptop-based work, lots of meetings via Skype with our partners overseas, and then just random running around town to meet this person or go to this event or try and pick up some new stuff so that our pop-up shop is cuter the next time we do it, We're very hands-on. We don't have a huge team, and we take care of everything from the really important stuff like finance reports through to just buying new coat hangers.
So I guess what's one thing that most people, the average person don't know or understand when it comes to a huge issue like addressing economic inequality in a country like India or Myanmar?
I think poverty is something that's very visible. I think most people have an image of poverty through World Vision marketing, through to the news, and I don't think it's something that's hidden or that people aren't aware of, but perhaps the complexity of poverty is difficult to communicate, and the way that it affects women very differently than it does men. So I think perhaps a good example is that we've gone out into a remote rural area of Assam in India, and that's a post-conflict affected area, which means that the economy is very flattened. There's industry has kind of come back in the form of oil. Tea has continued to be there, but there's not really any commerce or high-level kind of private sector engagement in that area. Most people would depend on small farming, just doing some work on their own looms at home. So I guess it's difficult. I think most people wouldn't understand the impact that a conflict can have in the first place to an entire economy and to an entire social structure and how people function for, decades afterwards. And what that means for women and how that changes their experience and their social roles and their roles in the economy. In that loss that surrounds conflict, women lose quite a lot, and very often they lose their status as that conflict kind of brings them into this really focused role of women as the protector, the protected as mothers, and their role becomes very, very small. So even in these areas of northeast India where women have a really significant role in the economy over, hundreds of years, the conflict kind of strips everything bare, I guess, and it makes recovery a really long process. And women need particular attention in that. You can't just go in and drop some money and assume that it will get there, which is why you end up with microfinancing programs that are specialised for women and that sort of stuff.
It's a pretty big social mission you've got there. And
what
I was wondering is, how does the Fabric Social ensure that it's working towards achieving its social mission while also running a profitable business? How do you juggle the two?
Well, I guess our entire basis is trade for social good. So I think the social enterprise scene can be a little bit confused. The definition of what a social enterprise is, I don't think, is particularly clear. I think it's still contested. So we base ourselves on trade for social good. So that needs to be our primary focus. We're not an NGO. So if we're going to make money for people, we need to do that within the business model. So the way that we keep money flowing into the communities and meet that primary objective of money going into our producer communities is to place continuous orders. So to position the business so that we can have a minimum order running at all times so that the people that we're working with can have income security. And we're there to play the role of a good buyer for small organisations that haven't got to a point where they're capable of having a good buyer. That takes, time and work. So we come in, we provide that stability of income and lots of inputs around it, training around quality control and supporting them to get, professionalised as we're travelling along. But providing that income security is the core of what we do. So then how do we maintain a profitable business? We try to expand our sales channels. We try to do marketing that works. We try to take care of all of these, things that make clothing sell.
That makes sense. Take us through what you consider your worst social entrepreneurial moment to date. Tell us that story.
I'm just killing it every day.
That's fantastic to hear.
No, I don't know that I would have any nothing comes to mind. There's bad days, definitely. There's times when you just can't sleep because something's going wrong and it's really on your mind. But I think we've been careful about the way we've gone about doing our business and how we form our relationships and how our model works for the people that we're working with. So I don't think I've had kind of a a full-on moment where I've just doubted the whole system and what we're doing.
Well, I guess that sort of feeds into my next question. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned throughout the journey of creating Fabric Social, and in the frame that our listeners could maybe take your lesson and apply it to their own causes?
I've come from a background quite apart from fashion in the first place, but also business. So I've come along with a whole lot of skills that are very translatable. But what we learned in the beginning was that we really need to bring expertise into the organization, which is why we have a focus on how we work with designers, and we try to translate that across to projects where we can. But for us, it's also a massive learning experience. We needed to be really clear about what skills do we have and where are they going to be real strengths for us, and what skills are just gaping holes, and how can we bring that in. And we tried to do that from the outset, and we got really lucky with our designer, Ali Dean, who's, an absolute darling, but also very professional, really on top of how to translate design that's easy to execute, but really fashion forward. She knows all of the technical stuff that she needs to do. She's a dream to work with. And I wouldn't know the first thing about patterns or fabric grains or any of this at the beginning, but that's been a real learning process. So I've learned from our partners as well as the designers that we've worked with as well.
That's so good. What would you say is the greatest idea that you had to date? So, for example, if you had this, this aha moment, if you like, how did you turn that into what we see today? So what was that idea?
All right. I actually have something that's come to mind, and it was my aha moment shared with the intern that we had at the time. So the fabric, in fact, was a real process to develop. So our flagship Airy Silk fabric, I think, we were so lucky to be so ignorant of textiles and to actually land in a state where this particular silk is native and beautiful and absolutely joy to work with, and kind of the perfect way to introduce silk into the Melbourne market. It's raw, it's got very low sheen, and it blends really nicely with cotton. It wears beautifully, and it's a really lovely textile to work with. But we came across it quite by accident. We were playing around with other blends of silk, and we were looking at using 100% silk, but the cost was quite high. And we were concerned that people, especially Melbourne, Sydney type market, is getting a little bit more conscious about fabric, but generally fast fashion has kind of destroyed any awareness of the importance of natural fabric. So we can't go into the market with something very, very, very expensive. So we were thinking about what to do, and it was actually our intern's idea, Kamseng, who's the daughter of our partner actually. We really liked her, so took her on as an intern for a while. And she just said, why don't we just whack in some cotton? And that was it. Honestly, that was it. We were just freestyling fabric solutions. We're in that product development phase and looking at all different sorts of stuff and how it dyed, and yeah. And
from like my experience of seeing your guys' stuff, that's sort of your signature now, isn't it?
It is. It's become, it really has. I think our love for the fabric has become evident in the way that our brand looks and how our design has progressed since those early days. We're still into cotton, and we're into looking at different natural fibers. We're exploring bamboo in Myanmar, which that'll be a very long process, but I don't think anything will take the place in our heart that this Airy Silk and cotton blend has formed.
Oh, beautiful. And so wondering, how do you guys go about communicating with your investors and your donors and any, just even your average supporter who's buying a product? How do you communicate with them to show the impact that their money is actually having?
We talk a little bit less about impact as we're moving along, because we are a social enterprise, but we're also a fashion company. And we've learned a little bit about what people respond to and what people are actually really interested in. And this idea of radical transparency, I think, is how we communicate that. So you'll see that we participate in Fashion Revolution Week. We do a big campaign around that. And we go out and take photos and the producers become involved in that, and they'll go on and do that in their own, apart from the Fabric Social, they're obviously their own little organizations, so they will participate in it as well. And if you go through our website, we talk all the time about where it's made, what it's made from, who made it. And that's become kind of a core of our business. I think in this ethical fashion segment, there's a bit of a push between whether or not you should talk about these things, or whether or not we should just let fashion be fashion and be satisfied to say that it's ethical. Personally, I think that this making the producer visible is a way to communicate our social purpose, but it's also a way it gives what we do meaning, I think, when you buy something and you know about its history and its life and how it came into being. So it ceases to be just a T-shirt or a dress. It becomes a precious object in your life. And I think that's a really nice way of telling this story that I think translates into, beautiful products that matter to people.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, absolutely. It makes it special so that when someone goes, oh, I love your shirt, you can go, well, actually, it was made by these amazing people in Northeast India. It's just, adds another layer.
And I think also that consumers have become increasingly savvy about where their product come from and make ethical choices. So, partially because they can, also maybe because, like, again, in this conversation, like there's this, this kind of, it makes public the ethical choices. So, they can say, I've bought this, and it's like the social conscience. It makes them feel good as well. Yeah. So, yeah, nice.
So when the Fabric Social started, you had 3 co-founders, yourself, Fee, and Katie. And I understand last year Katie left the business and you welcomed Megan to the team. So as a young organisation, how did you guys go about managing this huge change?
Well, Katie moved on to do bigger and better things in law, but Megan had actually already been with us from the beginning. So I think it was... We were still in our crowdfunding campaign, and we'd yet to have partners. We hadn't secured our designer, and Megan came on as a volunteer very early on. And she's been involved with us since then in various capacities, and she actually was studying, I think, at those early times. So her commitment has kind of gone up and down as her circumstances have changed. But she's graduated and has been an important part of the company since we kind of began. So how do we manage the change? I guess we've tried to create roles that are transferable. So nothing should live in me and be, fall apart if something terrible was to happen to me, or if I left the business. We've done our organizational development stuff. There is position descriptions, really distinct functions that we all play. And if something happens to me, then my portfolios need to be dealt out to somebody else.
I think that's so important that is probably missed a lot in young social enterprises.
Yes, it's hard. It's really hard to do it while you're doing it. And it's a really slow process. In fact, I dedicated quite a bit of time to just getting out some of the fundamentals into policy. And there's just a point where you run out of time, or it continues to get to the bottom of your pile. To deal with, how does our reimbursement system work, or, all of these kind of organizational development, boring bits. But yeah, it really needs to be done. So we've tried to make the effort, and I think it really has paid off because we're 3 years old or something like that. I think we're 3. Yeah, but we have a good, organizational structure, I think.
It's really refreshing to hear that, I think. So we're coming to the end of our interview. And so for our final couple of questions, we just want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind. So don't spend too much time overanalyzing.
You've noticed my weakness. I'm a long talker.
Not a weakness. Just it's absolutely awesome. So the first question we wanted to ask you is, and it can be absolutely anything. It doesn't have to be about, Fabric Social and that sort of thing. But what are you most excited about today?
Coffee.
I love it.
We went and got coffee before this interview. We're like, we need coffee.
What was the one thing that was holding you back from starting the Fabric Social?
My real job.
What was the best advice that you ever received?
Oh, I can only think of silly inspirational quotes I've seen online because my brain is a jerk.
We love those. They're always good for a hashtag motivational Monday.
I think my mind is actually just being sarcastic back to itself. No, I'm sorry. I don't have nothing comes to mind except like go for your dreams, which is silly.
No, it's not silly at all. I think that I mean, sometimes the things that are cliches for a reason, you know?
Yeah, perhaps. You're right. Yeah.
And so if you could leave our listeners with a few words that they'd really take to heart today, what would they be?
Organizational development.
Do you want to expand?
Yeah, well, if the listeners are social enterprise people or think about starting a social enterprise, I think organizational development, form a good, solid organization that is capable of growth and that functions really nicely through conflict and difficult times. You need to take care of your internal stuff as a tiny organization. It really helps.
Love it. And I just want to finish the interview by doing a bit of a shout out, I guess. So can you tell us what's the best way to reach out to you and also get involved with the Fabric Social? Because you have a very strong presence on social media. So just let us know what's the best way to reach out to you.
We're very active on social media, like you said. So best way would be to look at our Facebook. We always respond to messages, or on our Instagram, and obviously check us out online. You can check out our store at thefabricsocial.com.
Can people buy, if they're based in Australia, can they buy your items in any stores around Australia at all?
No, we're moved out of brick and mortar retail. We're thinking about doing some pop-up shop type things though, as in try now, buy now in cafes, once a month or something like that. So watch this space. We're often at pop-up markets. That's kind of our base, and online. But we're looking at how we can cater to those people who do prefer to try something on.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sharna.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The Goodie Bag. All right. Let's see what's in the goodie bag this episode.
So for this episode, I'm gonna put in the goodie bag the youngest certified yoga teacher in the world. He's 11 years old. His name is Tabby Atkins, and he discovered yoga when his mom was doing yoga to help her heal through cancer. And so what he thought is, I'm going to help other people. And he's giving yoga classes, basically donation-based. And 100% of these donations go to kids who have cancer. I think it's absolutely amazing. I mean, I love and practice yoga myself pretty much every day. I would love to go to his yoga class, that's for sure. And if you want to kind of see his story and just, kind of see who I'm talking about, we're going to share his story on our Facebook page, The Human Factor.
Awesome. So I'm putting in a documentary that was aired on the Australian channel ABC. And the documentary is a 3-part series called The War on Waste. And it's been put together. It investigates Australia's waste problem because we are one of the most wasteful countries in the developed world. It's really quite confronting to see how much plastic waste we make. And there's a really great social media community that's built around it. It's really great to see people going, oh my gosh, this is a real issue and what can we do to stop it? And one of the cutest little things that happened after we watched it, my husband Jared actually started a little bag for our soft plastic recycling, which he's never done before. So I had a little proud wife moment.
Bless him.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please head to iTunes, rate us and review us, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Then go to our Facebook page, The Human Factor, and hit like and join in the conversation. Tell us about what you thought of today's episodes. And if you have any thoughts or insights to add to anything Sharna said today, please leave us a comment. Perhaps you've been inspired to start a business with purpose or are just making more ethical fashion choices. Whichever, we'd love to hear from you.
Or you can tweet us at _human factor or visit the website at humanfactor.com.au and leave us a voicemail or a message. This show is just one part of a community that wants to affect and grow social change. So if you have a topic or a person you'd like us to interview, please let us know.
You're all awesome, and we'll see you next time.